And I think a copy of my speech is on the way. If it's not already here, it'll be here very shortly. Count Corla, for today's debate, we first need to clarify what we mean when we talk about Ireland's long-standing policy of military neutrality. In practical terms, and as practiced by successive governments for many decades, the policy means that Ireland does not participate in military alliances, nor in common or mutual defence arrangements. As the Taoiseach has said on a number of occasions in recent weeks, military neutrality does not mean we are politically or morally neutral. Neutrality has never stopped us from participating in world events, nor self-evidently from being affected by them. Nor does it mean that we are inactive in situations where we see flagrant breaches of the UN Charter and clear violations of international law, including international humanitarian law. Addressing our Dáil in 1963, John F. Kennedy observed that Ireland pursues an independent course in foreign policy, but it is not neutral between liberty and tyranny, and never will be. To quote Archbishop Desmond Tutu, he says, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." And that is the approach we take. For over 60 years, not a day has passed when Ireland's peacekeepers were not on duty in blue helmets somewhere across the world. Our defence forces' record of continuous service is the longest of any UN member state, and with over 500 permanent Defence Force personnel serving as peacekeepers today, our contribution to UN peacekeeping is Europe's highest per capita and 6th highest globally. We've also actively shaped and contributed to the development of the UN's Common Security and Defence Policy, and we are significant contributors to UN-mandated-led crisis management missions around the world. Ireland was amongst the member states that championed the development of a civilian as well as a military crisis management capability by the EU, so that today we have Irish men and women advising on policing and security sector reform, border management, judicial reform, human rights and gender policies, and cybersecurity and hybrid threats in Georgia, in Iraq, in Kosovo, in Ukraine, Somalia, Libya, Niger, and the Central African Republic. Ireland was also to the forefront of designing a new European peace facility, which allows for the strengthening of military and defence capabilities of partners and supports the military aspect of peace support operations, notably those carried out by the African Union and other regional organisations. Ireland ensured that the facility was designed in such a way that countries who did not wish to finance or provide lethal weaponry as part of measures adopted under the peace facility could instead finance non-lethal and protective equipment. We've seen this work in practice in the Ukraine crisis, where Ireland's share of €22 million of the €1 billion support package to the Ukrainian military has gone solely on non-lethal equipment and support. In the view of the government, the bill we are discussing today would serve to seriously undermine our proactive international role. Indeed, the bill would be likely to curtail Ireland's efforts to contribute to international peace and security rather than in any way enhance it. On this basis, the government opposes the bill. Let me outline a number of our key concerns. First, the bill could constrain the executive's ability to exercise its authority in respect of the conduct of internal relations, as already articulated in Article 29 of the Constitution. In particular, the bill, if enacted, could constrain the government's scope to participate in UN peacekeeping missions, particularly missions with a Chapter 7, that is, a peace enforcement mandate. The same would hold true for UN-mandated EU-led or NATO-led peacekeeping or crisis management missions. Currently, the main overseas mission in which Defence Force personnel are deployed are the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, or UNIFIL as people will know it, with 344 personnel, and the United Nations Disengagement Observer Force, or UNDOF, in Syria with 132 Defence Force personnel. Other missions include the UN-mandated NATO-led International Security Presence K4 in Kosovo with 13 personnel, and EU-led Operation Althea in Bosnia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina with 5 personnel, and the EU-led training mission in Mali with 20 personnel. These missions are undertaken in pursuit of the UN principles of making international peace and security, taking effect collective measures to prevent and remove threats to peace and protect civilians. In apparently seeking to prevent all military action other than defence of our own national territory, this bill would potentially neutralise the ability of Ireland's defence forces to serve overseas. It would remove, or at the very least significantly constrain, a pillar of our engagement in the world which has been characteristic of this state for 75 years. Second, the bill as presented could also potentially go a step further, precluding even the provision of non-lethal equipment and support to regional organisations such as the African Union or to third country partners such as Ukraine, through our participation in the European Peace Facility. It could prevent a current or future Irish government from using the instruments and tools at our disposal, either bilaterally or through the EU, to give practical expression to our foreign policy. To be blunt, it would prevent us putting our money where our mouth is. Third, the bill also purports to provide constitutional guarantees that the state shall not allow its territory to be used by other states to transport war material or personnel to third countries for the purpose of war or other armed conflict. Like Corla, everyone in this House already knows that foreign state and military aircraft that are permitted to land at Irish airports, including at Shannon, must comply with strict conditions. These include routine stipulations that the aircraft must be unarmed, carry no arms, ammunition or explosives, and must not engage in intelligence gathering, and that the flights in question must not form any part of military exercises or operations. These conditions are applied to all international partners, and they're not specific to individual states, and they'll continue to be applied. Moreover, as deputies will be aware, there are already provisions in the Constitution that underpin Ireland's foreign and security policy framework. In particular, Article 29 establishes the framework within which Ireland conducts its international relations. For example, Article 29(1) reads, "Ireland affirms its devotion to the ideal of peace and friendly cooperation amongst nations founded on international justice and morality." Article 29(2) confirms that Ireland adheres to the principle of the peaceful settlement of international disputes. Article 29(4)(9), which sets out that the state shall not adopt a decision taken by the European Council to establish a common defence pursuant to Article 42 of the Treaty of the European Union, where that common defence would include the state. Indeed, the protocols attaching to the Lisbon Treaty specifically recognise Ireland's policy of military neutrality, stating inter alia, the Lisbon Treaty does not affect or prejudice Ireland's traditional policy of military neutrality. And of course, international deployments of the defence forces, other than for humanitarian purposes, are subject to the triple lock, that is to say, a UN mandate, a government approval, and in the cases of deployments of over 12 personnel, Dáil approval as well. Let me finish with a few words about the current international and geopolitical context. We are living in completely unprecedented times. Russia's appalling actions in Ukraine demonstrate an utter disregard for international law, the UN Charter and Europe's collective security architecture, including Russia's own commitments under the OSCE. We need a fresh conversation here in Ireland about our own approach to security and defence, a mature, honest debate about the world that is and Ireland's place in it today. The Taoiseach has already made clear that Ireland's neutrality is fundamentally a policy decision. He has indicated that the issues involved could, at an appropriate time, be discussed through a citizens' assembly or a similar framework. To an extent, part of this conversation has already begun through the work of the Commission on the Defence Forces. And we've already had a long debate on that commission, and I suspect we will have more. It's important that these conversations are allowed to take place in an open and evidence-based way, and at an appropriate time. Inserting provisions now into the Constitution on military neutrality, without allowing for a serious discussion of the threat environment that Ireland and its EU partners now face, and the appropriate response to that threat, simply closes off that conversation before it's properly even begun. So, Ceann Comhairle, this is the context in which the Government opposes this bill and the constitutional amendments proposed here by the deputies. Thank you.